Hi, this is Jeff from the Ozark Mountains in Missouri, USA. Today, we're going to do a simple repair on the contents of this little bag. This was sent to me from a fellow I met on Facebook, and it is a PG Designs RAM expansion for the TRS-80 Model 100. Now, the curious thing about this is instead of fitting inside like the factory RAM modules do, this fits in the expansion door and provided from 32K to 224K of expansion and 32K banks. So you could have each 32K bank set up as its own little computer basically and switch in between them. Now this has a very simple problem. It's got a broken pin, but these pins are a little bit unusual. So this video is not only about the repair, which isn't going to be that difficult I don't think, but it's about finding an unusual component when you don't exactly know what it's called or who makes it, which is the case I was in. So let's get started. I'll get this on the bench, we'll do a close-up and see what's wrong. Here is a close-up of the module. You've got some logic here, and imagine this is some type of GAL or PAL for some decoding logic. We've got our RAM here. It's got its own backup battery. You see, even on the bottom of this RAM module, there's another chip of some sort there. And it's got a row of pins here on the bottom that plug into the Model 100. And it's got another row of pins here on the top as well. And the problem is that this pin here is broken. So we'll slip this in this board holder. This board holder I just 3D printed. It's magnetic. I thought it was quite a slick design. I'll look more at that later. Okay, here's a close-up. So I'll try to rotate this up. You can see the pins here, and this one is broken off, and the thing is they are flush on the other side of the board, but I'm sure there's a part that sticks through. I think the plan of attack to remove this will be to heat it up from the top, take this X-Acto knife and slip under the edge of it and kind of pull up while I'm heating it. Hopefully that'll do the trick. I've tried to arrange things here to get you a good shot, but it's rather delicate and I need to get in here myself to be able to work on it, so hope everything comes out okay on the camera. So I've got the knife in there. I'm just going to touch the pin. So here we are from a slightly different angle, and I've put a dab of solder on the end of the soldering iron. We've got the knife tip underneath it, and that's what it took to slip that pin out of there. Now I'll take the desoldering gun and clean the solder out of the hole. And after that's done, I'm going to peel back this double-sided tape that was holding that ribbon in place and clean up those few solder joints underneath it that got touched with the iron when I was doing the other work. Here is where the broken pin was, and because I tried to touch these up, a few of them with that double-sided tape over there, I had to peel the tape back, put a little flux on these pads, and just wipe the iron over them to clean that up. And then I put some more flux and solder on this hole and cleaned it out again too. In case you're curious, I just printed out these board holders yesterday. I found this on Thingiverse, and I'll put the link below. And it's actually 3 different colors because I had some leftover filament and I thought perhaps there would be just enough blue and white to make this, and there wasn't, so there's a little clear on top too, and I had to use one of these diagonal grooves because this one is too deep on the top to hold it horizontally, but it still worked out fine. I happen to have some magnets of the right size. I originally didn't think I had those, so I printed this out to glue some little disc magnets in, and then I found some of these out in the garage. It's kind of a clever design. You put it down like it would be sticking down like this, but when you squeeze this lever, it helps pop it up. So, just like that. And I found this piece of scrap OSB, plywood type wood, in my wood scrap box, and this is just a piece of sheet steel that was from a cover of something. It looks like I've used it as a heat shield for doing some plumbing soldering or something. So, and the little pivot pin here was a 440 screw with the head ground off. So literally this whole thing was made with junk box parts. So I was able to measure the existing pins, the ones that hadn't broken off, but I didn't know what the diameter was of the part that went through the board. So that pin looks like this. It's kind of like I don't know, sort of like a sword, I guess. And since my calipers are in inch units, I first wrote down my dimensions in inches and converted that into millimeters. Data sheets may show inches and or millimeters, so it's nice to have both. Basically, this tail end is about 1/2 millimeter wide, 20 thousandths of an inch. The top is about the same. It's measured at 18 thousandths of an inch, which is just under 1/2 millimeter. But what I was doing while recording this was just explaining all the different measurements, the diameters and lengths and things like that that I would need to try to find a new part for this thing. So the first thing I looked at was a pin from a machine socket. Now, unlike a traditional socket where the pins are formed by bending and folding sheet metal, these are actually machined out of solid pieces of metal. It's shaped more like the tip of a dart or something. It doesn't have the part that goes back through the board, and there's not enough of this skinny part up here. And we have a machine pin header, and this is closer, but the skinny parts here are actually too thick and they're not quite long enough. And the last thing I had on hand was another type of machine pin header, which was very similar, but it had even thicker pins. So that wasn't going to do. I wasn't exactly sure what the name of this type of pin was, but I've seen them before, and figured I would start searching under machine pin. What I knew about this type of pin used on this RAM board was that it's probably a somewhat standard item, because those would have been made in too small of quantities to have some custom item made, and it was most similar to the types of pins in machine pin sockets or headers. So I went on Mouser, it's one of my favorite suppliers, and I searched for machine pin sockets, and I found things like these. And these types of things here looked more similar, and I looked at different searches along that line. And it seemed like a lot of them were called PC board sockets or component sockets, and so I looked there too, and I found these types of pins, which looked very similar, and I found some by Harwin, which looked very similar. And so, since I knew a couple manufacturers, Milmax and Harwin, I went to their websites like this and used the product finder, and this was actually, Milmax's website was actually really good. And after looking at the different part numbers and comparing the measurements I took of all the different parts of the pin, it looked like this 3121-1 would be the right number, and this XX is the type of, if we look here, that's the pin finish. Since the other ones were gold, I looked for the ones that were available in the gold finish, and then what I found on Mauser were these. And you can see in small quantities they're a little over 50 cents a piece, and they go down a lot as you buy them by the thousands, which makes sense. Sell at 15 cents each. That's kind of expensive. I imagine if you're buying 30,000, 100,000 at a time, a bigger order like that, the price goes down quite a bit. But anyhow, this is the type of pin that we need. It's got the right measurements, and so I'm going to get a couple of those in on my next Mauser order. One other thing I found while searching online was here at Tandy Wiki. Had a really nice write-up on this RAM board. You can see how it fits in here. This is that ribbon I was talking about being taped on there. And this here would have been an option ROM. It had different software on it that you could get. So this RAM expansion is kind of straddling that option ROM, and there's kind of a system connector down here that it's plugging into. And he's got some files here with the things that you need, the software you need to run to use it, and the directions, and that type of thing, which is really nice. A few days have passed, and the replacement pins came in. Now, you might recall that I really only needed one pin, but they were only about 50 cents a piece, so I bought two to have a spare in case I accidentally broke one or I lost one, and I can send the extra one back to the owner so he has it in the future. As I was waiting for these to show up, I thought a lot about how I was going to solder the missing pin in there. And I've taped back that piece of ribbon used to pull the board out. You can see there's our hole where the pin goes. And if you can see, just there is where that pops through. I can just get a conical tip soldering iron in there if I come at an angle like this. Because the problem is, I will take the tweezers there and set the pin in there, but I don't want to touch this vertical part right here that sticks out of the board. I don't want to touch that with the soldering iron and coat it with solder. I could possibly touch the trace here with the tip of the soldering iron and conduct enough heat over here, but I'm not sure I could get enough solder underneath it. So I'm hoping the pin will hold itself in with friction, and then I can get a dab of solder on it from this side. So this is going to be difficult to do and to film, but we'll do our best here. I tried to position the camera where you'll get a good shot of the board. So I'm going to take one of the pins out of the bag here and try to poke it in the board with the tweezers. Oh, you can't see the bag. Here's the bag. I've seen it. There is our pin. Okay, that fit right in the hole. And it looks just like the other pins. I think I might try to put a dab of solder on it from the side here just to hold it in place, so I can flip the board over and get a little pressure on it to solder on the top side. So we'll get some flux. Got the flux here. Just put a drop of flux on there. Get my solder. I'm using 6040 lead tin solder. That's what would have been used originally on this, or 6337, whichever you prefer. What I'm doing there is tinning the tip of the iron. apply some solder to it, let the flux burn off, and you'll coat the tip of the iron and keep it protected, and it'll make it work better. Now, just put a little dab of solder on the iron. I'm going to try to hold the pin in place with my screwdriver. And just touch the side of it here. Oh. That didn't quite work. So take the pin back out. Make sure the silk screen is off that little bit of a trace. Pop the pin back in there and we'll try that again. Just trying to hold it in place so I can flip the board over and get some pressure on it from below. Okay, I don't know if you can see that, probably not, my hand's in the way. Okay. I think I'm kind of looking at this pin from all angles. Can heat it a little from the other side. That looks really good. Okay, so now I'm going to flip it over so I can put pressure down like that. Another drop of flux on there. And I'm going to have to rotate the board around so you can't see what I'm doing. I'm putting pressure down right here, which should hold that pin in place. Got a little bit of solder on the tip of my iron. I'm going to sneak the tip in. Okay, well that looks really good from this side. I just held the iron on there long enough to activate the flux. The flux starts to smoke, and it'll kind of suck the solder in there around the pin. Flip this guy back over like so. That looks really good. Okay, get you a close-up on that. This will be a bit shaky because I'm going handheld here to get a better angle. Right here is the top of the pin that I've soldered in. I went ahead and cleaned that up with some alcohol and a Q-tip. Washed it and dried it, so to speak, with the Q-tip. You can't just smear alcohol on there, because all you're doing then is moving the flux around the board. Just going to wipe it down with some alcohol and then dry it off with a rag or the other side of the Q-tip that's not wet. That side looks pretty good. I'll flip it over. And this is the pin right there. Which looks really good. I think we have a successful repair now. One thing I just noticed today is, maybe if I can get you up like this, you notice the corresponding pin isn't over here. There's only 19 pins on this side, and there's 20 on this side, so they must not have needed this one, and they decided not to even bother populating that on the board. Got out my Model 100. This is one I fixed in an episode about a year ago to show you this expansion bay door. this slot right here was for an option ROM, and it's kind of a funny socket here. It's not quite normal. Some people have made up adapters so you can use a standard ROM in there. And this is kind of like a low profile machine pin 40 pin socket, and it is part of the system bus. And so this was for other types of expansions, including the add-on disk drive, video display unit. What's that called? DVI, disk video interface. So the idea with this guy is you would pop him in like that and carefully work it down into the socket, so you can see they had very little room to work with in there, and they did an amazing job with the types of packages they had to work with at the time to get that to all fit in there. So I'm not going to pop that in there right now because I don't want to have to try wiggling it back out without damaging anything, but you get the idea there. So it's kind of a tight fit, and you got to hold your mouth just right to not break those pins. Well, I hope you've enjoyed the repair process on our PG Designs RAM expansion for the TRS-80 Model 100. Now, the actual repair wasn't that complicated. It was just replacing a broken pin. But the trick was going from not really knowing what the part was called to finding it, and I hope you can see that by starting with what you do know, that it's some type of machine pin, and tailoring your searches and looking at all the information you can find from a component supplier like the manufacturers that make similar things, then looking at the manufacturer catalog to narrow down what it is you're after, and then taking the necessary measurements to compare the products. The other part of it, to actually soldering the pin in there, having a few days to think about how to approach that was actually a big benefit, because it let me work over a few ideas in my mind and decide, what might be the best way to go about that, because I didn't want to get any solder on the part of the pin that contacts the socket itself. We also have an extra pin that I'm going to send back to the owner of this board, so if he has problems in the future, he has the part and the part number, so he can get it fixed again. If you have any questions or comments, please leave them in the comments section down below. If you're not already a subscriber, please consider subscribing. If you look below, you'll see a rectangular subscribe button. Just click on that guy, and when you do that, you'll see a bell-shaped icon. If you click on that bell icon, as soon as I post a new video, you'll be notified. Otherwise, YouTube might not ever tell you. They're pretty good about that. Until next time, bye.
Thank you.